Alright guys, so here we are on day 2. I've got the 800 suspended and I'm looking in here. Again, you can see the grease in here from the boot, and this is actually kind of mushroomed over here. I'm not even gonna waste my time with it. I'm gonna go ahead and start on disassembling this whole side here and continue the process on the other side. The plan here is I'm gonna go ahead and replace the ball joints, the wheel bearings on all 4 corners, upper and lower ball joints while I've got all this off. I'm gonna replace the CB shaft here, the brake rotor, the brake pads, and the tie rod ends. And the way I'm actually going to do the tie rod ends, the steering was very exceptional. It had no issues as far as alignment. So what I'm going to do is, after I get it off, I will measure center of the head to center of the other head, and whatever that distance is what we need it to be when we put the new tie rod ends on here. And I'll show you more on that, getting more specifics when I actually get it off and go to switch them over. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on it. We'll go ahead and start out, guys, by knocking some of this heavy crud off of here. Make sure it's not in our way when we actually start putting wrenches and sockets on here. Plus it'll just be less we got to deal with overall during disassembly and reassembly. It don't need to be perfect, and the idea is just to get the crud out from the crevices where we really got to get our wrenches and sockets. Alright, got that part done. I'm going to go ahead and start disassembly by taking off this 19mm nut on this tie rod. And you can see she's spinning there, so we'll go ahead and put a wrench on that, stop that from turning. That was simple enough. Got that end out. Now we'll tackle that inside. And that intake boot is in the way of the socket, so I believe I'm going to go to a open end wrench on that. And there's the first tie rod, folks. You can tell that one's a little busted, been leaking some grease. Slop don't feel too bad though. But I'm just going to go ahead and replace them. Be done with it. Alright guys, what I'm going to do here, I've got a bolt right here with a nut on the other side there, 15mm. I'm going to go ahead and take those out, release that pinch on the bottom of the spindle so I can drop that ball joint out the bottom. Then got a 17mm nut up here, and back that off so I can break this ball joint loose, and we'll go ahead and pop that whole spindle right off of there. Alright, there's that nut and bolt. Now we just gotta get to that top. Alright, got that nut out of there. Now go ahead and pop these ball joints loose, and that spindle should come right off of there. There's one. And there's the spindle, guys. She's off. And you can see one of the races from the wheel bearing is still on there. The other race from the other side is just completely gone. So go ahead and take all that nonsense out of there so we can get all this cleaned up and replaced. One last thing before I go ahead and yank this axle out of there. I'm gonna go ahead and loosen up this caliper here and take that brake caliper out of there, get it out of the way, so when I jerk on the axle, the brake rotor here won't be hung up behind that. The whole thing should come off as one cohesive unit. Okay guys, to take off this caliper, you've got a Torx behind the brake rotor here. If it's set like that, you won't even see them. But you got one there, you rotate it, and you got another one there. That's a T40 Torx bit. And that's what it looks like there. I'm using 1/2" drive T40 with a 1/2" swivel and a 1/2" extension. We'll go ahead and back those out, get that brake caliper out of the way so we can yank this axle out of there. Truthfully, I think I can get away without the swivel here. Yep. Didn't even need the swivel there. There's the first screw. It's like a mushroom head, inverted mushroom head with T40 star in there. So now we're going to rotate the axle back so we can get access to the second bolt. Coming from behind the shock on the back one. Break it loose. Take the ratchet off here. And go ahead and pull that nut out there too. Now at this point, both of those bolts are out. So we can go ahead and slide that caliper right up and out of the way. Now we can go ahead and start yanking on this axle and pull it out of there. This would actually be a good time to go ahead and break these bolts loose if you guys want to save your rotor for the next to be reinstalled. I plan on replacing mine, so I'm not too worried about it. Alright guys, so I've got the axle out, and I think while it's out I'm going to go ahead and pull these seals and put some new seals in there as well. And as for the axle, this end of it's fine, but this end is where the problems were. Like I said, you got some flares on the threads there, grease bleeding out through the boot. I'm not even going to waste my time with it. I'm just going to replace it all together. And looking at the rotor off the machine, it's actually not in bad shape. I'm still not going to put it back on, but I'm going to go ahead and take it off and put it in storage. I do tend to work on a lot of CanAms here. CanAms are pretty popular in this area. People are always needing extra parts, so I'll put them up and save them for when I do need them for another build or another project. I'm going to go ahead and oil these threads just a little bit. Help it back out just a little bit easier. Yes guys, that is a metal can of 3-in-1 oil. Yes, I am that old. I am old school, and I still prefer the old metal can 3-in-1 oil. I thank my father for that. He gave that to me. So we'll let that oil sit in there on the threads and move further along with the bike. So what we're doing here now, guys, I'm going to go ahead and replace these wheel bearings on the front. That's the steering knuckle there. Wheel bearing sits inside. There's a little thin wall that goes around the back to stop the bearing from popping out this side. It's pressed in from the outside here. This is actually on the outside of the machine. And if you look, there's a little circlip that goes around in here. And let's see if I can point it out to you. It's right there where the screwdriver stops. There's two little ends of that clip. Let me show you a new one here. Give you a better idea what these things look like. This is what's sitting down inside of there. And if you notice, one side is cut at an angle, and the other side comes to a different point based on the way that they're cut. What we want to do is get the screwdriver in underneath that wedge so that we can pry and pull this part back out of that shoulder inside of there. There's a little recess goes all the way around in there. So we need to pull that back and pop that spring out of there. And there she is, guys, just like that easy. Now you can see there was a lot of grease and stuff all over that. That was the NICs that I had put on there the last time when I reassembled the hub assembly. So it didn't have time to rust up on me or anything, or let this get seized in there, so it popped out pretty good. As long as you keep your parts lubricated, they should come together and go to separate pretty easily. That one's actually still in good shape, so we'll be reusing that. The new ones that I have that came with the wheel bearings, I'll put those aside for future use. So now at this point, I've got the spring clip out of there, so that's a smooth all the way around. I'm going to put it in the press upside down like so. I'm going to set a socket up there, use my press this completely out the bottom. Alright guys, so I've got the part here in the vise, in the press, and like I said, the pressure is going to be pushing from the inside of the knuckle here, and it'll come out the other side. I've got this cup at the bottom to allow some recess to come out. Reason I'm doing it like this, as you can see, my supports are bent. This thing is old, had a lot of use on it. I need to get these replaced. So I'm trying to keep it as level as I can to get through this job here, and then I'll look at replacing my supports on my press here. But for the meanwhile, this is a 36mm socket, 12-ton hydraulic jack. You don't need that much pressure, but that just happens to be what I have here. And again, driving the force directly down, push that bearing out the other side there. And you can see she's going in nice and smooth. Alright, now I'm hitting pressure again, so I'm going to go ahead and back this off because that tells me that the bearing is actually sitting flush inside up here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out so I knock that bearing the rest of the way out. So there it is, guys. The old bearing is out. There's the inside of the knuckle there where the bearing was. I'll take some time to clean that out really good. The old bearing just looks dirty. It doesn't show any real signs of wear. However, while it was still on the machine, there was some slop in the wheel, so I'm not going to waste time waiting for it to explode on me. I'll just go ahead and discard that and put a brand new one in place. And this one will drop in the same side that that one came out of. And you look down inside there, you can see that shoulder I was talking about. That's what will stop the bearing from coming out the other side. Once this is in, we go ahead and put the spring clip back there to hold the bearing in on this side. So let's get to it. Alright guys, from this point here, I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of brake parts cleaner, spray a little bit on a shop cloth here, and I'm going to wipe around the inside of here where the bearing sets. Get that good and clean. The main idea is to get all the mud and dirt out of there. You don't want to leave anything in there that can potentially work its way into the new bearing and contaminate the grease inside of there, thus for ruining your balls inside of your bearing there. Get her good and clean. And now we're ready to start pressing the new bearing in place. You can see here, guys, bearing is going in nice and easy. Get that good and flush. And now I'm going to back this off and use the socket, get equal pressure, and sink the bearing all the way down to that bottom shoulder inside of there that I showed you earlier. Alright guys, so as you can see, the bearing is all the way in there, pressed against that wall on the side like I said it would be. And on this side, got that shoulder, the internal shoulder exposed to place the snap ring. I'm going to go ahead and wipe that snap ring down. Get it good and clean. And reinstalling that is really nothing. You can see it's just a little tension. Set that in there like so. Now I'm going to take a screwdriver and just work my way around and press down until there it goes. It actually snaps in place into that shoulder in there. And now it's good to go. Now everything I just showed you guys was for the right side of the machine. I'm about to go ahead and repeat the process for the knuckle on the left side of the machine. This is one that actually came apart on me while I was riding. All because the cotter pin came out of the axle, allowing the castle nut to spin its way off. Everything just went to crap from there. But anyhow, I'm going to repeat the process over here that I did on this one. And once I get done with that, I have this little greasing tool here that sits down inside of there like so. Put your grease gun on here, pump it full of grease. Usually takes about 5 to 10 pumps to get enough grease in there. They recommend you do not over pump. A lot of people pump it till you see grease coming out of the seals and such. It's recommended you don't do that, because if you get too much grease in there, then the wheels are gobbed up by the grease and they don't roll smoothly. The balls, rather, I should say, not the wheels, but the balls. They don't roll smoothly, and that also causes premature wear. And I've also heard people talking about explosion, the wheel bearing exploding on them, kind of like what happened here. So I'm just going to put 5 to 10 pumps in there, see what we got, and leave it at that, and go ahead and put it in the machine. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and take care of this one. Alright guys, as you can see, I got the second bearing in there. I've just got to install the snap ring. To be clear, yes, there is a lot of ways out there that you can get these bearings in and out. You see a lot of methods, putting them in a vise, beating on them and such, you know. And yes, that does work. I'm not trying to knock your methods or anything. But in my experience, even using a socket equal to the size of the wheel bearing and go to beating on it, it does cause some form of damage to the bearing trying to beat on it like that. And some people are better at getting it in with less damage than others. Some of them look really good, actually. So for you guys quick to get offended and say, hey, no, I do this all the time, you're right, and that does work. This is just my preferred method to get one smooth press all the way in without smacking on it. And it's just my preferred method, and you do what works for you with what you have in your shop. For those of you guys doing it in a vise on the bench, something you might want to consider investing in is a ball joint press. If you know what you're doing, a little bit of mechanical skills in the garage will help you go a long way with that. Using a ball joint press, lining your cups up right, you can still use that in the same concept as my shop press to gradually increase the pressure and slide that bearing in without beating on it. That's the number one goal, in my opinion, is get the bearing inside of there without smacking on it. Alright guys, remember what I was talking about greasing this thing? Now I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm just using a basic grease gun that you get at your local automotive store. You can place the tip on there, make sure she's set really good. I'm going to start pumping. Nine, 10. That was 10 pumps. You can see no grease came out either side. But 10 pumps worth of grease is a good bit of grease in there. So we know there's plenty of grease inside of that bearing. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and switch the tool out. And put it in this one. You can see a little split right there inside of that bearing. That's where we got 2 separate cups on each side. And the way this tool works, there's little tiny holes around the sides. They actually go through that split and forces its way into the bearings in there. I know this might be old news to a lot of you veterans out there that's been doing this a while, but there's also a lot of new guys out there that's all new to this. And that's the guys that I'm aiming towards. I hope you guys learned something from this. And that's why I like to wear gloves. Get a lot of that grease out of there. Whenever dealing with a grease gun anyways, I love to wear gloves. Alright guys, I got those done, so I'm going to set those aside. And backing up, remember when I was talking about the tie rod and trying to do the alignment on it? Good thing is while this particular one was going bad, it hasn't come completely apart or destroyed the arm or anything. So I've still got all my dimensions there. What do I mean by that? I can essentially line up exactly where the old shaft was, line the new one up with it, see exactly where the new one needs to go. And it looks like I'm actually in luck with this one. And same with over here, looks like they're going to go exactly in place of the old ones. And by exactly in place, I mean it doesn't need to go any further up the shaft or further out. It'll literally stop exactly where the old one was. When I was talking about trying to alignment, what you can do is get a tape measure, measure from dead center of the shaft, come all the way over, measure dead center of that shaft, take that exact measurement, and when you put your new heads on, you tighten them up until you get to that exact measurement. And that'll put them, your new heads, exactly where the old ones were, if you go by those measurements. Now for me, I can do that with the measurements because my alignment was fine. Now if you're pulling or anything, bike's pulling to the left, pulling to the right, you might have to make some other adjustments. This method I'm talking about here only works if your alignment is already straight and true. I'm just replacing tie rods, getting done with it, because I had that one bad one. I'm just going to replace all 4 of them because I already had the tie rods laying around from a previous job. Alright guys, from here, 17mm inside nut, and yes, I am using a crescent on the outside here to break the tie rod itself free. And pay attention to which side that you're working on, because one side actually has reverse threads on it. You see that coming loose? And going left, what should be lefty loosey, is actually tightening that side. So now this one, same with this, I'm actually turning it to the right and it's coming loose. So pay attention to your left hand, right hand threads so that you don't think you're trying to loosen it and over tighten it and tear something apart. Alright, now I held that nut totally steady. I think I grabbed the wrong head. Actually, it's supposed to be going the other way. Here we go. So I'm going to take this back down to that nut because I've held it steady the entire time. Hasn't moved. Get that in place, and at this point I'll go ahead and tighten up that nut to lock that tie rod in place. And now I'm going to go ahead and repeat the process for the other side here. Now this side is left-hand threads, which is your common industry standard. So I'm going to break that loose. And while that's loose, I'm going to go ahead and take that tie rod off of there. Put the new one on, and into place. And before I actually tighten that one up, we'll go ahead and get this on the machine and get everything lined up on the machine before I go ahead and tighten it down, make sure it's permanently in place. One thing I forgot to mention here, guys, if you look at your assembly here, see this little flat indentation here? That's if you need to, you can slide a wrench over there. If the stuff's giving you a hard time, you can try to hold that steady while you break this part loose. And that is on the outside of the machine, so that's the outer tie rod, and this is the inner tie rod over here. The inner tie rod has normal threads on it, meaning you turn it to the right to tighten it. Outer tie rod has left-hand threads, meaning you turn it to the left to tighten it. Now before I put those tie rods on the machine, remember that axle I showed you that was messed up? The boot was split, the threads were kind of messed up. Well, anyhow, I've got a new axle here to replace it with. And I need to go ahead and put the brake rotor back on and get it prepped and ready to be installed on the machine. And those bolts there that goes through that disc is a 13mm. I was going to replace the brake rotors, but they were actually still in good shape and so I had plenty of life left in them. So I decided just to stick with these, put them back on. Hey guys, wanted to show you where we're at. I got the axle back in place along with the brake rotor on, and the knuckle I'm in the process of putting on. I did put some anti-seize on the splines here. That's where the spindle will go that holds the wheel on, and that's over the course of time, and you dig into these enough over years, you'll see that without any type of lubrication of any sort in there, you get metal to metal, you get rust contamination, and it starts to seize up. It's just a mess. So I like to put just a little bit of anti-seize around the splines in there, protect that area. You do have to take the bolt out of the upper A-arm if you're going to feed the axle in with the brake rotor attached to it. Otherwise it won't clear. So I was able to take this bolt out and bring the shock out of the way, bring that A-arm up out of the way, and the whole axle went in. It gave me a little bit of a problem. There was just a little bit left to go, so I took a sand-filled dead blow hammer with the castle nut on the end of here, just gave it a couple light taps, and it fed the rest of the way inside where it needs to be. So anyways, yeah, I got that fed in there, put the shock back in, put the bolt back through. Now at this point, I've got the castle nut on the bottom of this ball joint. I'll tighten that up just a little bit more, and then I'll get the bottom set, run that bolt in there, and then I'll start tightening that stuff up. And then we'll get to the tie rods, and eventually, last but not least, get the spindle on there along with the castle nut, and of course a brand new cotter pin to go through there. Make sure we don't repeat that problem again.